Young potential leaders are some of the most overlooked and underdeveloped talent in our churches and organizations today. Yet the future is in the hands of their leadership. If you want to change the trajectory of their growth and leverage this important development opportunity, stay tuned because today I'm going to give you 7 ideas for developing young talent. Hey guys, this is Mac Lake bringing you tips, tools, and techniques helping you develop more and better leaders. Hey, there's a friend of mine who's about 35 years old now. He leads a very large and significant nonprofit in the United States. It literally impacts thousands of churches and nonprofits every year. Well, we were talking one day and he told me a story about when he graduated high school. He had a driving passion for ministry and especially wanted to be in missions. Well, he did a bunch of research and he identified as many missions agencies as he could. And then he wrote letters to 78 different organizations, letting them know that he was graduating from high school and he had an interest in serving their cause. He mailed off these letters and he waited patiently. Out of 78 letters, only 2 organizations responded. One of them sent him a form letter. The other actually gave him a courtesy call. But not one of them took him up on his offer to serve their agency. Now, I don't know why many of them didn't respond, but I'm sure in many cases, his age was a factor. And many of these organizations, they missed out on an opportunity, huge opportunity, to develop what would become one of America's top Christian influencers. So today, his organization hosts a giant leadership conference, and they have tons of young people attend. And you know what he does? I love this. He invites dozens of missions agencies to come to set up their booths at this conference so that young people can meet them face to face. And then he uses his own staff to follow up on all the cards that are filled out at these booths to ensure they're getting follow-up from these missions agencies. Now, that's a guy who's serious about developing young leaders. One of the greatest pools of future talent in our church and organizations are young people. It's so easy to overlook this high potential crowd because of their age. And I'm talking about people who are 16, 18, 20 years old. These will be some of your primary leaders in the next 5 to 10 years. So why not start developing tomorrow's leaders today? So today, I want to share 7 ideas for developing young talent. The first idea is help them develop their self-awareness. This is what gets so many young leaders in trouble in their 20s and 30s. They really don't have a grip on who they are. I used to run a one-year internship several years ago at a church, and the very first thing we did with these young leaders is we would have them take a series of self-assessments. We would have them look at their personality, their strengths, their passion, all these things about themselves so they would have an understanding into who they were. And then it also helped me because I was in charge of developing them, and you can't really develop somebody unless you understand who they are. But here's the key. Once we identified their strengths and their passion, their personality, all these different things, then we continually referred back to those things so that they could look at themselves on a consistent basis through the grid of those assessments so they could really get a grip on who they really are. You wouldn't believe how much that helped them gain a sense of self-awareness and matured them in the way they interacted with others as leaders. The second idea to develop young leaders is position yourself for honest conversations about their character. This is where some older leaders get tripped up in developing young leaders. They forget that they're young leaders, and young leaders are still developing their character. This means there are times they're going to be late to things. They're not going to follow through. They're going to say inappropriate things. They're going to make bad decisions. That's what young leaders do. They're young. So don't give up on them when they make mistakes. You know, when you're building a development relationship with a young leader, here's what you want to do right up front. You just want to tell them, hey, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to challenge you where you need to be challenged. I'm going to encourage you where you need to be encouraged. But I'm going to be honest. And that way they're expecting it from you. And then you deliver on that as well. When you see something, you call them out on it, okay? And the longer and stronger your relationship, the more you're going to be able to be honest with them. But point out critical areas where they need to grow while at the same time demonstrating your confidence in them. The third idea is expose them to big people and big places. When young leaders are kept in one environment, they fail to develop a depth and dimension that they're going to need in order to lead when they face new or different contexts. Listen, I grew up in a small town, population about 500 people. And I grew up in a church that never had more than 70 in attendance. I didn't grow up in an era when they had the internet. So needless to say, when I went off to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, I was exposed to a whole new world that I didn't know existed. I'd only heard little country preachers growing up. Then all of a sudden, I was sitting in chapel every week listening to guys like Warren Wiersbe, George Sweeting, Howard Hendricks. Now, you may not know who those people are, but back when I was 20 years old, these were some of the world's greatest preachers and communicators of the day. And I remember sitting in chapel service every week with my little black notebook, filling out 3 to 4 pages of notes during a 30-minute chapel message. I'd never heard the Bible taught that way. And it blew me away. And so what we've got to do is we got to ask ourselves the question when we're working with young leaders, who or what can I expose these young leaders to? It's either exposing them in person, introducing them to your network of people, or taking them to a conference, or just introducing them to books and podcasts where they can be exposed to different leaders, different ways of thinking, different perspectives. And when you do this, you're going to help them see things they have never seen before. You're going to give them exposure to new people and new places, and that is one of the best ways you can equip young leaders. The fourth idea is speak life into their giftedness. I'm constantly amazed at how many young leaders and older leaders I talk to who tell me they've never had a leader speak significant words of life and encouragement into their souls. So be generous with your praise. You know, I've worked with a lot of young leaders, and I've discovered that the higher the confidence I have in them, the higher the confidence they have in themselves. Our words of encouragement, it's going to help them see their own potential. And when they begin to see their own potential, oh my goodness gracious, it helps them take bigger risks, which leads to bigger growth. So remember this, celebrating their strengths is one of the best ways to cultivate their strengths. Celebrating their character is one of the best ways to develop their character. So speak life into their giftedness. The fifth idea for developing your young talent is provide stretch experiences. I was speaking at a conference just the other day when a young 20-year-old man came up to me and he said, Mac, I'm struggling to find an older leader who will mentor me. And I told him, unfortunately, many in my generation look at people at his age and his generation, and they just don't invest in you because they think, yeah, you need to pay your dues, young man. And I looked at him and I literally said, I'm sorry and I apologize for my generation. I told him, I said, listen, man, you have a bigger advantage than I did when I was 20 years old. You have more exposure to books and podcasts and access to leadership content through the internet than I ever could have imagined when I was 20 years old. And for that very reason alone, you need to get bigger experiences sooner than I did. So guys, what we got to do is we got to find high potential young leaders in our church and give them opportunity to get leadership experience. Think about it this way. Give them the assignments that you wish somebody would have given you when you were their age. Yes, they're going to fail. Yes, they're going to mess up. But let them do that under your mentorship rather than letting them do it when they're out there on their own later on in life with nobody to debrief it with. So give them an opportunity to speak, to lead a project, to follow up on people, to lead a meeting. Give them something that's going to stretch their skills. And then praise them for their success and coach them in their failures. The sixth idea for developing your young talent is push them to read. We've all heard that leaders are readers, and it's true. When you stop reading, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, you stop leading well. So help your young leaders establish a discipline of reading. Give them some books and meet with them to discuss what they're learning from these books. Hold them accountable for their reading. Here's an idea. Okay? Identify the top 6 books that shape your character and competencies and have them read those books and discuss those books with you over the next 12 months. I've put a link in the description below of some of my books that I like young leaders to read so you can check those out as well. Now, the seventh idea for developing young leaders is this: challenge them to dream with audacity. What if we could challenge the next generation of leaders to see further than we saw, believe bigger than we believed, or trust God for a movement of revival like the world has never seen? Challenge them not to settle for the status quo and to trust God bigger than you did in your lifetime. Hey, I want God to use me in my lifetime, but I also want God to use the leaders that I'm developing for the future. I want to see God use them bigger than He even used me. So these are 7 ideas for developing young talent in your church. So many people neglect this particular group. So let me ask you a question. Why wouldn't we champion, challenge, and resource the next generation of leaders this way? There's only 3 answers to this question: busyness, laziness, or selfishness. In other words, there is no good reason not to champion the next generation of leaders. Hey, if you want to dive deeper into this, just click the playlist above and watch more videos on developing leaders, and I'll see you next Tuesday with a new video.